All right, this is the rectangles, rhombus, and squares packet. It's page 1. Okay. The first one is true and false. So all squares are parallelograms. So a square is defined as a parallelogram with 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So this has to be true, right? All squares have to be parallelograms. That's part of what they are. Okay, number 2, all rectangles are squares. So a rectangle is defined as a parallelogram with 4 right angles. A square is defined as a parallelogram with 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So a square is always a rectangle because it has 4 right angles. But a rectangle is not always a square because in order to be a square, that rectangle would have to have the 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So it could be, but most of the time it's not. All squares are rhombuses. So a square, again, is a parallelogram with 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. A rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. So since all squares have 4 congruent sides, all squares are rhombuses. That one is true. Okay, all rhombuses are quadrilaterals. So rhombuses have 4 sides, so that means they have to be quadrilaterals. Quadrilaterals are 4-sided polygons. Okay, a rectangle is a parallelogram. So yes, all rectangles are parallelograms. A rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. That's what it's defined as. So that is true. Okay, and then all quadrilaterals are rectangles. That's false. It could be a rhombus. It could be a kite. It could be a trapezoid. It could be, none of those, right? It could be something else. So that one's definitely false. All right, 7, 8, and 9 have to do with the angles. So in a rectangle, the 4 angles of a rectangle are 90 degrees, right? Because a rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. Okay, which means when we draw in our diagonals, okay, each corner is going to have to add up to 90. So 27 degrees and the 27 here are going to have to add up to 90. So 90 minus 27 gives me 63 degrees. Okay. And we know that in a rectangle, diagonals are congruent. And since a rectangle is a parallelogram, we know diagonals also bisect each other. So in a rectangle, your diagonals are both congruent and they bisect each other. That means all 4 of these pieces here are the same. They're congruent. And therefore, you have 4 isosceles triangles, right? So if this is 27, this is going to be 27 down here, 63 and 63, right? These two have to add up to 90, so this has to be 63. So it's this triangle's isosceles, again, 63. And then 27 and 27. Vertical angles are congruent, so this is 126. And then linear pairs should add up to 180. So 180 minus 126 gives us 54 and 54. So this is what the angles are going to look like in rectangles, right? The numbers might not be the same, but the pattern is always the same. It's always that same pattern. Okay, rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. And the extra properties we know about the diagonals is that they're perpendicular. So we're going to put in 90 degrees here. All 4 of these angles in the middle are 90 because the diagonals are perpendicular. And we also know the diagonals bisect the opposite angles, right? So angle 8 here is going to also be 53 degrees because this angle at A is getting bisected by the diagonal. Since a rhombus is a parallelogram, we know opposite sides are equal, which means you're going to have 53 and 53. And we know that 3 angles of a triangle add up to 180. So if we look at just one of the 4 triangles here, small triangles, we can do 180 minus 90 minus 53 gives us 37. And since the angles are bisected by the diagonals, you can put 37, 37, and 37, 37, right? And these should all be degrees, 37 degrees. Okay. And then in a square is a parallelogram that has 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So it is both a rectangle and a rhombus. So since it's a rectangle, these corners are all going to be 45. Since it's a rhombus, the diagonals are perpendicular. So these will be right angles in the middle. And since it's a rhombus, the diagonals bisect the angles, which means each one of these are going to be 45 degrees. 90 divided by 2 is 45. 45, 45, 45, 45, and 45 degrees. All right, so that's angles, right? The numbers may change, but the patterns are always the same, except for the square. The numbers and the pattern stays the same. Right, 10, 11, and 12. So let's just fill in your area, your pieces here first. So a rectangle is a parallelogram, so opposite sides are equal. So 5 and 12. All right, we know diagonals are congruent and they bisect each other in a rectangle. So 6.5, 6.5. And since the diagonals are congruent, these are also going to be 6.5 and 6.5. All right, and then we can fill in the answers there. A rhombus is a parallelogram where all four sides are congruent, so we could fill in 17 for all of these pieces. Right, and then diagonals are perpendicular, right? But that's relevant for angles. Since the rhombus is a parallelogram, diagonals bisect each other. So MB is going to be 15 and MC is going to be 8. Right, RSTU is a square. So we know that all of the sides are going to be equal. So if one side's 17, the other sides are also going to be 17. And we know diagonals bisect each other. So if MT is 12, RM is also 12. Okay, and since it's a rectangle, a square is a rectangle, right? It's got the same properties. So the diagonals are congruent. So that means UM has to be 12 and MS have to be 12 as well. And then you can fill in your missing pieces. All right, on the back now of that first page, we have the proper, solving, right? We got to solve for X, plug it back in and stuff like that. All right, so 13 is a square. FGHJ is a square. So we know squares have 4 right angles. So we know the measure of angle F should be 90 degrees. The measure of angle G should be 90 degrees. We know that 3x is going to equal 90. And then when we divide both sides by 3, we get x equals 30. So that's going to be 30. Right. We also know in a square, all 4 sides are congruent. The square is also a rhombus. It's got 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So we can write out our equation 15y plus 2 equals 11y plus 10, right? And they're equal to each other because all 4 sides should be equal because it's a square. So we're going to subtract 11y. That gives me 4y plus 2 equals 10. Right? We're going to subtract 2. So we're going to get 4y equals 8, which gives us y equals 2. And then we're finding JH, so we're going to plug that back in. 11 times 2 is 22, plus 10 gives us 32. All right, RSTU is a rectangle. So we know the 4 angles of a rectangle are 90 degrees. So angle RST, that's 90. Angle URS, that's 90. All right. Since this is a rectangle, we also know it's a parallelogram. So we can set right all 4 of these pieces, RM, SM, UM, and TM. They're all equal to each other. So we're going to do 4x plus 7 equals 6x minus 1. We're going to solve for x. So we'll subtract 4x from both sides. We get 7 equals 2x minus 1. We'll add 1. we get 8 equals 2x. So when you divide by 2 on both sides, you get x equals 4. When we substitute that back in, 4 times 4 is 16, plus 3 is, or plus 7 is 23. 6 times 4 is 24, minus 1 is 23. So RM 23, right? UM would be 23, MS would be 23 as well. And then RT is going to be 23 plus 23, the whole diagonal, which is 46. All right, number 15, ABCD is a rhombus. So we know we have 4 right angles. So right away, we know X is 90. All right, we also know the diagonals bisect the opposite angles. So this one right here is going to be 42. So we can do 5y plus 2 equals 42. We subtract 2 from both sides, we get 5y equals 40. And then divide by 5, you get y equals 8. Okay. So then we can do, right, these would be 42, 42. The 3 angles of a triangle add up to 180. So we can do 180 minus 90 minus 42 gives us 48. So then these 4 angles, including Z, are going to be 48 degrees. That's not a good 4. 48. All right, this one, opposite angles are equal in a parallelogram. So 8x minus 5 is going to equal 6x plus 13. Okay, we're going to subtract 6x from both sides. All right, you get 2x minus 5 equals 13. We're going to add 5 to both sides. So we're going to get 2x equals 18. And then x equals 9. We're going to substitute back in. 8 times 9 is 72 minus 5 gives us 67. 6 times 9 is 54 plus 13. That's 57, 67. So that's good. Then to find the other 2 angles, we have to do 180 minus 67 because they're supplementary, right? Consecutive angles in a parallelogram are supplementary. So angle P is 113. Angle F should be 67 degrees. All right, the last 2 you got to draw out. So let's see here. We're going to draw a rectangle. We know rectangles have 4 right angles. So we call this A, B, C, D. We know AB is 2x plus 5. We know CD is 5x minus 13. Since this is a rectangle, it's a parallelogram, right? Parallelograms are rectangles with 4 right angles. So since it's a parallelogram, opposite sides are equal. So we're going to do 2x plus 5. So text tool, 2x plus 5 equals 5x minus 13. I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So I'm going to get 5 equals 3x minus 13. I'm going to add 13 to both sides. So I'm going to get 18 equals 3x. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And I'm going to get 6 equals x. When I plug that in, 5 times 6 is 30, minus 13 is 17. And just to check, we can do the other side as well. 2 times 6 is 12, plus 5 is 17. So we know the length of CD is 17. All right, number 18, we're going to have a rhombus. Okay, we're going to call it WXYZ. Okay, we know the diagonals of the rhombus meet at point M. So I'm going to draw on the diagonals. And they're going to meet at point M. All right, WM is 4x plus 4. MY is 6x minus 2. Since this rhombus is a parallelogram, right? All rhombuses are parallelograms. They're parallelograms with 4 congruent sides. I know my diagonals bisect each other, so I'm going to do 4x plus 4 equals 6x minus 2. Okay, when I subtract 4x from both sides, I'm going to get 4 equals 2x minus 2. When I add 2 to both sides, I'm going to get 6 equals 2x. And then divide by 2 on both sides, I'm going to get 3 equals x. All right, and when I plug that in now, 6 times 3 is 18, minus 2 is 16. 16. 4 times 3 is 12, that's 16. So then WY is going to be 16 plus 16, which gives me a total of 32 units.